So around 1/3 of all the food in South Africa goes to waste, while roughly 14 million people go hungry. That 1/3 of that food produced is surplus food that is usable, that's good for human consumption, but that ends up as food loss and waste for a number of reasons. Some of the reasons include over-ordering, incorrectly labeled goods, short-dated goods, damaged goods during the production process, and so forth. In the meantime, all this food is good food and it's edible for human consumption. So how big is the problem across South Africa? Recent studies show that around 10 million tons of food is wasted on an annual basis, costing the economy roughly 70 billion rand. And this does not need to happen. What FoodForward South Africa does is we connect this world of surplus to this world of need by recovering this edible surplus food from the supply chain, and we make it available to those that need it. If you think about all the resources that also go into producing the food, the wasted resources of water and electricity and so forth, not only is the food wasted, but those natural resources as well, which compounds the cost to our economy on an annual basis. What FoodForward South Africa does is we engage with farmers, wholesalers, retailers, and manufacturers, and we talk to them about redirecting and recovering their surplus food so that they don't dump it in landfill and so that they don't incinerate the stock, but instead that food is donated to FoodForward South Africa at no cost. And we are able to make sure that that food gets to registered nonprofit organizations that focus on feeding programs in addition to other programs that they run in underserved communities. We call this process food banking. So what we do is we've got branches across the country, and our trucks would go to a farmer or a manufacturer or a retailer's business, and we would collect that surplus food. We bring that into our warehouses, we check it, we sort it, we store it, and then we redistribute that to just over 1,000 registered nonprofit organizations that provide meals daily to roughly 450,000 people. On an annual basis, we take care of about 20 million meals, making sure that 5,100 tons of food is recovered from the supply chain and from our partners. We have a national presence with branches across the country, and so we are able to make sure that even the poorest provinces, such as the Limpopo province, the Northwest, and the Northern Cape province, also receive food on a regular basis through our organization. We have a number of programs that we employ to make sure that food reaches underserved communities. So the one I've mentioned was traditional food banking, where our trucks would go to a distribution center or a farmer or a retailer to make sure we collect that surplus food, and then we redistribute that food to charities across the country. We also have a piece of digital technology called FoodShare. And what FoodShare does, it seamlessly connects our beneficiary organizations to local retail stores within a 5-kilometer radius of where they are. In that way, we're using technology to reduce our operational costs, but also increase the footprint so that we make sure that food reaches even the distant rural areas where our partner stores have a presence. Through FoodShare, beneficiary organizations do not pay the costs of interacting on FoodShare. All those costs are reverse billed to FoodForward South Africa. So there are no data costs, but we're able to make sure that even at store level, we're able to make sure that we access surplus food instead of that food ending up in landfill. The types of organizations we support focus on education, skills development, youth empowerment, at-risk youth, orphans and vulnerable children, aged care, abused women, etc. So in many ways, the food that is used to address hunger is also used as a catalyst for social change in communities, because 75% of the beneficiary organizations that we support focus on education, skills development, youth, and women. In the last financial year, we provided just over 20 million meals by the recovery of 5,100 tons of food. And that cost us just 85 cents per meal to be able to deliver. So it makes food banking the most cost-effective method to address hunger and save the environment at the same time. We also have an initiative called Second Harvest, and that's our direct program to farmers, our outreach program to discuss with farmers that instead of dumping their goods in landfills, that we have a discussion that while they are harvesting for either a manufacturer or a wholesaler or a retailer, that they redistribute that surplus food to us that's out of specification. We collect that food while they harvest, and all that post-harvest surpluses we are able to use to make sure that we feed people. In some cases, we receive so much goods that are highly perishable, such as tomatoes. And in that case, we make our own tomato jam and our own tomato pasta sauce. So agro-processing is able to take place also just using surplus food, and we're able to extend the shelf life of many products. We also have a program that reaches directly to rural communities. It's called our Mobile Rural Depot Program. And the reason why we set this up is because our warehouses are predominantly in urban centers, and we support organizations that are close to those urban centers. So in many ways, the model was very difficult for rural communities to access because of the distance and because of the costs. So what happens now, every single month, our truck takes food to local rural communities at central locations. And every single month, we are able to make sure that vulnerable communities and vulnerable people get food every single day. We also use a supply chain internship program. It's a CETA accredited program for unemployed youth that have a matric certificate. And we make sure that we provide them with the skills needed to be able to get into the supply chain, and we also try and absorb them into one of our partner retailers or manufacturers or wholesalers. That way we're making sure that we address the youth unemployment problem, which is running away with us in this country, but also that we provide much needed skills to underprivileged children that previously could not get access into the supply chain because they did not have the skills. In partnership with various corporates, we also run a school breakfast program, and that school breakfast program provides 50,000 learners with a cereal and milk every school day to make sure that before they start their school day, they get the food they need to be able to carry them out throughout the day. In many ways, our food banking model is also an environmental solution. And WWF, along with a company called Greenhouse, they did a study, and they found that for every ton of food that we recover, 4 tons of greenhouse gas emissions are saved. So in that way, our food banking model not only addresses hunger, short-term hunger, food insecurity, but it is also positive on the environment, making sure that we recover and redirect instead of that food ending up in landfills or instead of that food being incinerated. The Sustainable Development Goals, there are 17 of them. And because of our model, and because our model focuses on beneficiary organizations that are developmental in nature, our model talks to at least 11 of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And making sure that at least underserved communities are not only getting food, but that we are using food as a catalyst for social change. Now, this is quite an interesting model because in many ways, the surplus food we receive is addressing hunger. But because we are using surplus food, focusing on beneficiary organizations that are developmental in nature, for example, early childhood development centers, because they now receive food from us on a monthly basis, they make thousands of rands in savings on their grocery bill. And they are now able to employ those savings towards employing more teachers, building on additional classrooms. And because they're able to do that, they can keep school fees low, which means we can take more children off the streets and into classrooms to get an early childhood education. In many ways also, we have social enterprises that we support. For example, some social enterprises collect environmental waste, and they're able to sell that on to earn an income. So in those communities, what they do is they encourage unemployed people to collect reusable waste. They bring that into the organization. That waste gets weighed, and depending on what it weighs, they get an exchange of food and toiletries in return for that food. And in some ways then, we're cleaning up communities, but we're also reducing the environmental footprint of our waste profile across the country. And then, of course, because all the food we recover is good food. We focus on mainly getting food from companies that produce nutritious food. And we have able to make sure that over the last 3 years, that at least 80% of the food that we redistribute to nonprofit organizations is nutritious food. And in that way, we are making sure that we are not only addressing hunger, not only addressing food security, but we're also positively impacting people's nutrition, especially people with compromised immunity. People living with HIV and AIDS, people living with TB that have to take food in order to be able to take the medication on a daily basis. Because of COVID-19, the pandemic has been quite hard on South Africans in general. Prior to COVID-19, we had a food security crisis of around 14 million people that were hungry. But roughly 7 million people will now become unemployed by the end of this year, according to economists. For that reason, our organization has embarked on a 5-year plan to make sure that we not only scale up, but we do so economically, that we reach underserved communities, that we reach more rural communities. So the plan is over the next 3 to 5 years, we want to reach roughly 2,000 beneficiary organizations that are supporting 22 million people on a daily basis with either breakfast or lunch or dinner or a mixture thereof. So that is why we are having conversations with supply chain partners so that they're able to deliver and donate their surpluses so that we can feed more people. Thank you very much.